And Jay?
Hey, David will be here. He's just running a little bit late. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special workshop here for the city of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, on this Tuesday, the 8th day of April. My computer's not signed in, so I apologize if I don't have all of the information.
That's
here.
okay. We only have one item on the agenda.
We've called the meeting to order. We will now stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. We'll now turn it over to our city attorney, Ms. Kimberly Cobb.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will just wait for Ms. Riley to come on up. We are just getting started. You haven't missed anything.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. So welcome to all of the new council members and welcome back to the not new council members. Great to be working with you all and happy to be here tonight to talk about all of our favorite topics. I'll give you all kind of an intro on things and try to fly through it and give you the basics on everything, but just know that this is not an attempt to teach you everything in 1 hour or less. It's just an overview, and certainly anytime you guys have questions about anything, you can call myself or Jeff Burns at any time. We don't have a 9 to 5 mentality. I mean, you can call any time, and weekends and weekdays, and if you think you have a conflict or an issue with something, we're happy to talk it through, because a lot of that stuff can be pretty fact specific, and we can't address everything in one training. But can we put it up there? And we tested it right before this workshop started. So what I'm going to talk to you about it tonight while they try to get that up there is ethics, sunshine law, public records, briefly touch on Robert's rules since I know you already talked about it, and also quasi-judicial hearings. Any chance? You're right. It's behind me? Oh, there we go. All right. Let me test this.
Yep, let's move it.
Good.
Is that our agenda over there?
I don't know if it works, guys.
There's only one thing on here.
Down here.
That's the agenda for the
Okay,
actual meeting.
there it goes. I'll hold it in this exact,
This one has this one. I should have the new agenda.
I might just tell you guys and ask you guys. So starting with the code of ethics, and I'll go through each section of the training and then I'll pause for questions. So just if you have a question as I'm speaking, just keep it in mind and I'll get right to a question and answer time. But starting with the code of ethics, there's 3 areas that we deal with as local government officials. The standards of conduct, which you're going to see are pretty much like common sense things you probably wouldn't do anyway. Voting conflicts and financial disclosure. Could you switch it? Thanks. So starting with the code of ethics standards of conduct, there's 4 things that we're going to go over that you probably already know you shouldn't do, but just to give you the listing, the first thing is soliciting and accepting gifts. So you don't want to solicit or accept anything of value that is based on an understanding that your vote, official action, or judgment would be influenced by the gift. So if there's a vote coming up on something and the applicant wants to gift you, please don't accept it. Number 2, accepting unauthorized compensation. You should not accept any compensation, payment, or thing of value that is given to influence a vote or other official action, of course. The third, misusing public position. You don't want to corruptly use your position to obtain a special privilege for yourself or anyone else. And then for disclosing or using certain information, you don't want to disclose or use information that's not available to the public, obtained by reason of your public position for the personal benefit of yourself or others. And again, I know those are pretty obvious, but it's just worth going through once.
Ms. Cox?
Yep.
Can I just add as well that I think one question that I've always asked over the years is, could anyone just walk in and get this same deal, or would you give this item to anyone? And that kind of just eliminates all problems right away if you actually ask that question of the person that's offering you some kind of, oh, you're the mayor, or oh, you're on the city council, the drinks are on me, or the food's on me tonight. Well, would you just do that for anyone? And if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't take that.
That's right. Great way to look at it. So going to the next slide, less obvious now, we'll get into voting conflicts of interest. And this is one of the things I think, if you see something on an agenda and you're not sure if you have a conflict or not, and it's gray to you, just call. Our conversations are attorney-client privileged, as long as they're verbal. If you send me an email, it will be a public record, but we can talk confidentially, and if you do have a conflict, you will announce it publicly, of course, but we can talk through your concerns confidentially before the public meeting, and then you can let the public know if you have a conflict or not. So this is generally that Fort Walton Beach elected officials and your appointed committee members are prohibited from voting in an official capacity upon any measure which would inure to the special private gain or loss of yourselves or any principal or entity by whom you are retained other than the city, or to any relative or business associate. And generally, I'm going to say if you have a financial interest in something, you're probably conflicted out. Most of the time, if you have a financial benefit, you're going to be conflicted out. And I don't want to say there's no other conflict, because there are, but that's the biggest one. And then questions on anything else, we can look at on a case-by-case basis. The Commission on Ethics issues opinions on these things. And if you ever look through them, you'd be surprised how extremely fact-specific they are. And one fact can change the whole answer from the Commission on Ethics. So those questions can be complicated, but also sometimes the usual ones that come up are more obvious. Can you change the slide? Thanks. So the next one is if you have a prohibited voting conflict, what do you do? So you must announce the nature of the conflict before the vote, meaning why you have a conflict, what is the conflict, and then you abstain from voting, and you will file a Form 8B Memorandum of Voting Conflict, and the city clerk would get you that form. You may not participate in the discussion without first disclosing the nature of your interest in the matter, either in writing prior to the meeting or orally as soon as you become aware of it. And you may not participate in an attempt to influence the decision if you have a conflict. Is everyone good on that? Okay. So next slide. Oh, this is a bunch of forms and financial disclosure fun. And basically, your Form 1, which is your financial disclosure, has to be filed each year by July 1st. And the fun fact on this one is, I don't know if if the new council members have heard about Form 6. Have you guys heard about that? So that's like it's a more in-depth Form 1, and it asks you a lot of very in-depth questions about your finances. And there were several cities and individual council people all across the state of Florida that sued the Commission on Ethics, trying to say that this is really too cumbersome for local government officials. It shouldn't apply. It never used to in the past. And there were people resigning from small cities all over the state of Florida. So there was a big joint lawsuit, and the current status of that is that there was at least a preliminary injunction put in place where nobody has to file the Form 6 until the court takes further action. So right now, you just have the Form 1. If anything changes in the future, we'll let you know. But most council members were pretty happy that they didn't have to do the Form 6 listing every asset that they have. because it's just a little intrusive for some people. If you leave the council before July 1st of the year, then you must still fill out the Form 1 before July 1st, or you can be fined. And finally, when you file the final disclosure form, which is 1F, you have to do that within 60 days of leaving office. For council members exiting this year, they'll file a Form 1 for 2024 by July 1st, 2025, and Form 1F for 2025 within 60 days of leaving office, which would be May 30th. Again, the city clerk has all of these forms. You can contact her or myself if you have questions on any of it. And next slide is just giving you a moment for questions on any of the ethics that we've gone through so far. Great. Yep. You're not allowed to have questions. You've been here before.
Comment some advice like Councilman Allegretto did, or Mayor Allegretto now, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You gotta have, wait till the last minute on that too, because some people did or didn't wait till the last minute last time when that injunction was filed, and it was very nice to not. So I'm sure you'll be giving us updates.
Oh, yeah.
But if they come back out and say, hey, now you gotta go to this Form 6 that's due by this day.
Yep.
I would wait until the day before, because a lot of people waited and did it a week early, and then the day before is when this injunction
Yeah.
came. Unfortunately, I waited till the last minute. It's actually like a $10 fine if you didn't do it that day. So I was actually willing to maybe
Yeah.
pay $100 to wait and see what happened after the deadline.
Yeah.
And it getting, so just,
That's true. And I would say the Form 6, it might even, for some people, it might even require the help of a professional to prepare it. So, but I think when you say wait till the last minute with this pending litigation, it's still good advice. And even if the court changed course, I think they'd have to give you a reasonable time to get that prepared, because as of now, it's simply not required. And I don't know that
and
they'll
I'd wait
ever.
again. Wasn't it like
Yeah.
every asset over $1,000?
Yeah, it's
was a
pretty
very-
intense.
It was a
It's
very
major.
expensive list.
I mean, and the city of Destin was one of the cities that joined. There was, but I mean, all the way from Miami, all the way up, there were just people joining in. And the way the law firm in South Florida did it is all the cities paid a flat fee. So no matter how long the litigation came out, the cities didn't have to worry about continuing to pay. But the benefit for Fort Walton Beach is they didn't join, but they're still getting the benefit of the lawsuit and didn't spend any money, so
So twofold is,
congratulations.
don't panic, don't resign, don't run, just wait till the last minute and see what happens. Because there was other people, a lot of people did resign.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mayor Esther?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Okay, so going to the next part, sunshine law. This is something that I think you will deal with every day as a council member, probably. At least you'll have to think about it any time you come in contact with each other. So the sunshine law is a Florida state law. It's one of the broadest in the country, really, for keeping information transparent for the public. But as you know, meetings between you all must be public. A meeting means any gathering of 2 or more of you. So it doesn't just mean when you're all present, but even if there's 2 of you, that's a meeting under the law, and that means there has to be notice for the meeting, and minutes of the meeting must be taken. And you know, an example of a meeting that was required to be sunshine, besides the regular meetings that we're always at, was what just happened with the Roberts Rules. Because 2 or more of you were going, talking about city business, the clerk properly treated that as a sunshine meeting. Took the notes, took the minutes, and noticed it, and you all, you know, participated in a public forum that way. So again, that's applicable to any gathering, whether formal or casual, by any means, email, telephone, etc., of 2 or more of you to discuss some matter on which foreseeable action will be taken by the council. So you are allowed to talk to other board members if you're not on the board. So, you know, you can talk to your LPA appointee or whatever appointees you have, but it's just among members of the same board. I wanted to point out that this can apply to group texts, social media, and emails as well. So you don't want to be on a group text with each other. That's actually a sunshine law violation if you're interacting on text, even on social media. If one council member posts and another one responds, you've got a sunshine law violation. And same thing with email. Yes.
I think it's important to also say that that's only applies to city business, correct?
Of course,
I mean, if
yeah.
I'm on a text chain with Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Peter and Mr.
We're
Murray,
talking city
and
business.
we're like, hey, did you guys see the Dolphins
Yeah.
last night?
Yeah.
Right.
You can talk about anything that's not city
We're not
business.
committing a sunshine law.
No.
Or we
no.
coach baseball together.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
No. It has to be, like I said, a matter on which foreseeable action will be taken by the city council. But with that being said, there is also concern sometimes about the appearance of impropriety. And, you know, sometimes it's just not worth it. Because you can be talking innocently with another council member, but if people get the wrong idea, they can make accusations that we have to defend. So I'm not saying certainly don't stay friends with people you've been friends with before and after and during council, but keep in mind that appearances happen and people may think they're talking city business when they're not, and then you've just got to be cognizant of it and make sure that it doesn't cross that line. Going along these lines to the next slide is the conduit issue, which is when you talk to a third party and it kind of gets passed around. So it's not permissible to intentionally communicate to another council member outside of a public meeting on an issue that's reasonably foreseeable to come before the council through a third party. That could be me, the city manager, the city clerk, any of your friends, anybody in the community, anybody at all. And while it is inevitable that some unintentional communication through third parties will occur, it is important that council members do not solicit a third party to act as a liaison or conduit. In this type of case, violations of the Sunshine Law will be dependent on the intent of the council member. So, I mean, if you said something to a third party with no intent that that be transferred to somebody else, but that person happened to mention it unintentionally, it's probably not a Sunshine Law violation at all, but you just have to be aware. So if you know that someone is going around doing that, you're not going to want to talk to them about your business, especially how you're going to vote or items of an upcoming decision. Any questions on that yet? Okay. And then, so penalties for violations. The Sunshine Law is a law with teeth. First, actions taken outside of the Sunshine Law may be invalidated, meaning your vote could be invalidated. Second, there are non-criminal penalties of up to $500 for violating the Sunshine Law. And third, there are actually criminal penalties for knowingly violating the Sunshine Law. Again, there your intent is very relevant. But criminal penalties include both fines and imprisonment. So it's definitely a serious law. Attorney's fees may be awarded against individual council members unless you are acting on the advice of the city attorney. So if you have a question and you want to make sure that you are not getting yourself into any trouble and it's some kind of gray area, again, you can call Jeff or I at any time, day or night, weekday or weekend. Any questions? All right, that's one of the most important laws, I think, for you all to really understand. So if you start thinking about it when we leave and have more questions, I'm happy to further discuss. Going along with the Sunshine Law is the Public Records Law. And public records include all documents, paper, letters, maps, books, tapes, photographs, films, sound recordings, data processing software, or other material, text messages, social media, regardless of physical form or means of transmission made or received pursuant to law in connection with transaction of official business by the city. So again, it's only about city business. But anything you do that is city business related is a public record that has to be maintained by the city clerk. She's got a retention schedule that the state sets forth, and it is like a book that tells you, based on the type of record, how long it has to be saved. Some things are permanent, saved forever, like certain development approvals and things, and then other items are, you know, this might be saved for 30 days, 1 year, 10 years, just depends on what it is. But you should maintain anything and submit it to the clerk's office if you have a public record. Your city email, she can handle without you taking any action because it's on the city server. But if you have personal emails or personal cell phones, you should avoid using those. But if you do use them, you're going to need to get those records to the city clerk. So. Kim, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And if someone emails you that you know personally, to your personal, all you have to do is just forward that straight to your city email and then start responding with them through that. Once you've done that one time and sent it to your email, then you don't have to worry about it because it is, like she said, it's saved in the database. So you don't have to do that extra step of sending it to me.
Perfect. Could you do the next slide? And we're kind of already talking about what's in the next slide, but the important and common misconception is the public record confidential if it's located on your personal device? Is it exempt from the public records law? And the answer is no. That's a common misconception. Just because something is located on your personal device or personal email or personal phone does not mean it's exempt. And there are lots of exemptions, I will say, in the public records law for records, but you got to go with the general mindset that everything's public, and then if an exemption applies, when we get a public records request, we will remove it from the request. Okay, next
I have
slide.
a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I printed out materials that was sent for this training.
Yeah.
But what I did, because I was on my work computer, but I sent it to my personal computer and I printed out. Can you do that or no?
You can do that, yeah.
It was just the printout material for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I could certainly understand that, you know, because you're using
Well, I
multiple
have-
computers, but it's already on your city email, so,
Right.
yeah. Now, if somebody did a
But
public
I
record,
forwarded it to my personal email and
Yeah.
then I printed it.
yeah, but it's already on the other email too. It's on your city email already.
Right.
So we know that you have that. I guess if we got a public records request that said, any council members' emails with regard to today's training, we would say, Ms. Riley, could we please have all of your emails, and you could forward back that personal email. But I mean, you're not communicating with anybody, you're just forwarding documents to yourself that are already on the city's server.
Okay.
Right, Kim, do you have anything? Yeah. So you're good there. Now, if you had been emailing with someone on your private email, I would have said, send that in, but you're just doing it with yourself from city.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, so, well, you print out the agenda anyway, so I don't know, I just like to print stuff before I come, so
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, so when you're printing that, you are forwarding it to your private email, but it's documents that are already on the city server. So the city has the record, and now you're the city has the record of you sending it to yourself anyway. See,
Okay.
because if you have sent it from your city email to your personal email, we have the sent city
Right, you
email.
have it anyways in a
See,
sent file.
so, yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
No, it's a good
Wasn't
question.
anything- Okay. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's better safe than sorry to ask the question. Next slide, please. So the violations, again, similar to the Sunshine Law, there's criminal and civil violations. You're not going to get in trouble for, with criminal laws potentially unless you are intentionally or knowingly doing something wrong. So true accident, non-knowing violations are not criminal, but you can still incur a fine of up to $500. Intentional or knowing violations are first-degree misdemeanors that can, in serious cases, lead to removal from office, a maximum of 1 year in prison, and/or a fine of up to $1,000. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've had one council member that I know of that was removed. And in that case, it involved an alleged significant number of public records on a personal cell phone that were not turned over. But other than that, in 25 years, it doesn't happen too often. But if you have questions on that, we can talk about it. Whenever you create or receive any document related to your role, always assume that it qualifies as a public record that will ultimately be accessible to the public. Furthermore, if you produce or obtain a public record, please make sure to keep it and do not dispose of it to maintain adherence to the Public Records Act. And as we talked about, Kim's retention schedule that the state gives her and every other city clerk. Any questions on that? Yes?
I would just like to make a statement like
Sure.
Councilman Jeter moments ago. I just think it's an important, common knowledge thing to let everyone know, especially the new council members. Every text you send to the city manager, to the city clerk, to the city attorney, to the deputy clerk, to anyone here related to any city business is potentially public record. So you might have a hilarious joke that you want to share with one of these people. Well, just know you're going to have to take screenshots of your phone and send those in to the clerk. So whatever that conversation was, that's going to be included. So most of the time, the best thing you can possibly do when you have a question or need something is call.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge phone call guy myself, don't really care to be on the phone a lot, but in these cases, every single time, I just pick up the phone and call. because I don't want to have to send those screenshots in of whatever the conversation was, not on topic, and include that stuff, because it's going to be public record.
Yeah.
Same goes for emails, same goes for everything. When we have these meetings that are like closed, what are they called? Closed meetings? or Executive sessions. Any notes you write down on a piece of paper have to be turned into the city clerk as well.
There is an exemption for notes to yourself, but if you provide the note to somebody else, then
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you. I thought we had to turn those in, even if it was my own
you can.
doodles.
But if you're just communicating, so if you're just holding it yourself, you don't have to turn it in.
And there's something about the executive sessions though, because I have heard that they'll go around and take up the notes.
I
for
thought it was
executive
different in
session, because
executive
It's still
sessions.
confidential information, isn't it, during the,
Right.
I think.
I mean, if you want to give any information to the clerk, I'm not going to stop you, but
Now, in the regular meetings, no, you're right,
Right.
if they do the notes to themselves and don't share.
I think the advice about giving it to the clerk in the executive session is like a best practice, because you're afraid that somebody else may inadvertently see a note about city litigation and subject the city to liability, or, betray a confidence. But generally, notes to yourself aren't public records, and I think that's important, because during meetings, you may want to just take shorthand and not worry about, is this legible? How's this going to sound? I'm trying to write fast, and I don't want to sound illiterate if it's a public record. So that's why I think, it's okay to take notes, but if you do pass it on to anybody else, it is a public record, and, so
Gotcha.
that's
Thank
how I
you.
would see that one. But, and I'll, following up on what the mayor brought up, which is a really, really important point, I'll give you another example of something that did actually happen. And that was, an elected official was texting with a developer on a proposed development that was very controversial in the city where it happened. And he was actually in favor of the development, but other council members were very opposed to it. Like I said, it was controversial. And so the mayor was friendly with this developer, and when the developer did a public records request, the city clerk provided everything that he or she had, which was all the emails on the city server, all the documents in the community development file, asked the city council members for text messages, and everybody sent it in. But the mayor didn't. But it wasn't intentional. He was like, the developer already has it. So why would I submit it during a public records request? They already have the records. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong, but he didn't provide the records to the city clerk. So when the developer that requested the records from his public records request got them, the mayor's texts weren't in there. And they used that against the city to say, well, let's get everybody's personal cell phones now. Look at this, Judge. I have evidence that the mayor has text messages that they didn't provide. So who else is hiding text messages? And then everyone gets dragged into it. So text messages are something that you don't want to have city business on a text message, and if you do, it needs to be provided to the clerk, and that was, I remember lots of lengthy depositions on that issue, and quite a long, expensive process for the city, but a lesson learned. So does anyone have questions on that?
Prior to our election date, all jokes and text messages are sent, correct?
You're okay before, yeah. Yeah, you're good before being on the city council. And again, I don't mean to be overly scaring anybody as to their personal conversations that don't have to do with city business, because you still have your right to privacy, but when it does come to city business, it is a public record, and if they do, ever come to the extreme circumstance of trying to take a cell phone away because they think something was hidden, then, if you're giving up your personal cell phone, they're searching it, so. Okay, next slide. Robert's Rules of Order. I'm going to breeze through a little bit because I think you guys already had a lot of discussion about this, but if you have questions, we can get more into it. So Robert's Rules of Order are important. It's great to have rules when you have meetings for efficiency and fairness and everything good in a meeting. Parliamentary procedure is a set of rules for conduct at meetings that allow everyone to be heard and to make decisions without confusion. Members express themselves in the form of a motion, as you know. Motions are made and seconded prior to discussion, and then once the second occurs, that is when discussion happens. The goal is to stick to the agenda and the topic at hand. And I would say the chair of the meeting here, the mayor, or in the mayor's absence, the pro tem, are kind of in charge of the flow of the meeting. They will recognize the motion maker, they will get us through the agenda, they will make sure that things run smoothly and that people speaking in the public are on topic and not irrelevant, and make sure that things are handled efficiently and fairly. And Mayor, do you want to add anything as I go through this, or?
I'm loving what you're saying.
Oh, good. You're in charge here. So when there is a motion and a second, and then the discussion happens, and when you ultimately get to the vote and the mayor calls for the vote, as you know, most motions are carried by a majority. There's a few examples where a supermajority might be required, but on a day-to-day basis, we don't have them too often, and if they come up, we'll let you know. But mostly, it's majority vote rules. Approved motions are your guide to your work, objectives, and focus. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think this is kind of repetitive, so we can go to the next one after that. For city attorney questions, Robert's Rules says, please ask the city attorney questions when it's part of your turn to speak during discussion of a motion, or if it is during your questioning of a hearing participant, you can do it at that time as well. Only speak, as we discussed, when the mayor or mayor pro tem in the mayor's absence has recognized that it is your turn to speak during deliberation, unless you are making or seconding a motion or calling for a point of order, or if you are asking questions to somebody appearing before the city council. Does anyone have questions on those procedures or comments?
I would just like to add that, one of the most important things I'm going to really focus on is that we're trying to move these meetings forward. We want to share our information. We want to talk about these things. We want to ask good questions. That means coming into a meeting prepared, knowing what the agenda is, having asked questions to the staff leading up to the meeting. The agendas come out on Thursdays. That's plenty of time between Thursday and the Tuesday of the meeting that we have to ask questions. So if there's something that's come up and you don't understand what it is, call Mr. Reeves. And 9 times out of 10, he'll answer the phone in 2.5 seconds and go through whatever it is that you need, unless I'm in there taking up all this time like I did today. I really just want to focus on, we don't need to have 4 and 5 hour meetings in this room. We need to get the public's work done and go home. There's some of these staff members that have been here since 7:30 in the morning for department head meetings, and we're sitting in here at 10:30 and just kind of laissez-faire talking about whatever we want. We want to get the people's work done that they elected us to get done. And that means coming in here prepared and ready to go. So when we get to the items, on the agenda, we're looking for questions for whoever's presenting it first, right? So Mr. Frasetti, for example, has come up here to the podium, and now we're going to ask, does anyone have any questions about what he's just presented? At that point, it's so important to me that questions only be asked. That's not the time for a speech on how you feel about whatever it is. That's the time to ask a question about what he's just presented. Then we'll give the public the opportunity to speak as well. Then someone will make a motion, and then we will have our opportunity to say, I love that motion, I'm in favor of it, here's why, or I'm opposed to that motion, I hate it, and I think everybody should join me in voting against it, right? So as long as we can stick to that, let's go and have fun and do the public's work.
Yeah. And Mayor, couldn't agree more with everything you said. I guess one other thing is when the public is speaking, we're giving them 5 minutes each during a public participation, right?
Right.
So just for the new council members to know, the reason for that isn't to cut somebody off, not like we don't want to listen to them, but it's for fairness, because if we didn't have it, we would have to let everybody speak for 20, 30 minutes each. So instead of doing that, we have a reasonable amount of time and everybody gets 5 minutes. With that being said, when we have applicants for something, their time is unlimited. It's different. They're applying to the city for something, but for everybody in the public that just wants to speak generally, they have a 5-minute rule.
And it's obviously the chair's discretion as well. So if it's me or the mayor pro tem or whoever's running the meeting has the discretion to say, this person is making a compelling point. They've spent a lot of time preparing their remarks. Let's give them a little bit of extra time. At the same time, if we have a room full of people, as we've had many, many times over the 8 years, that Councilman Schmidt and I have been here, you'll see people come up and make the same point over and over again. So it's absolutely within the chair's discretion to say, I appreciate that you're here, that you're passionate about it, but we don't need to hear the same thing over and over. So that's also a good point for council. If you have a very similar point or feel the same way as somebody else, you can absolutely express that. It's just that rehashing everything that they've just said, again, it's not doing the public's business. We're just spinning our wheels.
So they, yeah.
And to piggyback off that, also too, I believe we can, call a vote from a council perspective. So if, in that example, Mayor mentioned, if there's a lot of people saying the same thing, boom, 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 and we've already had a chance to ask questions and things like that, and we feel like it's going that direction, and hey, it's 9 o'clock and all the directors have had a long day, and there's 32 more people still getting ready to talk, and we feel like it's already going to go that direction, we can call, while the chair still is presiding over the meeting, the council has that type of opportunity to call a vote.
Good point. For sure.
Yep. Okay, next slide, please. And next. This is just a review of the penalties. We already talked about some of them, but for violations of the Code of Ethics, the potential penalties, depending on the severity of the violation and the intent involved usually, is removal from office, suspension from office, public censure and reprimand, a civil penalty up to $10,000, or restitution of benefits received. So again, if you have an ethics question, come talk to me and/or Jeff, and we will be happy to walk you through it. Violations of the Sunshine Law, it is a second-degree misdemeanor to knowingly violate it, punishable with a fine of up to $500 or 60 days imprisonment. Other penalties include removal from your position. Violation of the Public Records Act, range from a fee not to exceed $500 to a felony. Removal from the position is also possible. And violations of Robert's rules, less serious than the other three, but can be censured by a vote of the board from talking further during a meeting. The city of Fort Walton Beach actually has in its code that Robert's rules do need to be followed. And if you all want to keep that in, that's fine. For me, a recommendation to consider might be using those as a guideline, only because sometimes you might get caught up in the technicalities of things unnecessarily. It's great to have the rules, but if something isn't done 100% in accordance with this very lengthy, detailed book, you don't want your actions to be invalidated. So if you ever want to consider it more of a guideline, we could do a code amendment. But moving on, does anyone have questions to this point, or are we ready to talk about the final topic of quasi-judicial hearings? Good? Okay, so quasi-judicial hearings are when the city council acts judicially but is not a court. You are, as a quasi-judicial body, you're considering evidence and making findings only on competent, substantial evidence in the record before the city council at the public hearing after due process has been afforded. So what this really means is there's a development application in front of you, a private person or a developer is here and wants you to make a decision on their proposal, their development usually. It could also be a rezoning, a variance, or something like that. You're going to be in a quasi-judicial capacity, and all these words I used are words that came down from the court's competent, substantial evidence means you're making your decision based on what you heard at the public meeting, on the record, and nothing from outside. And we're going to talk about outside communications in just a second as either the last or second to last slide, but it really needs to be made on what you have in here. So when you're making a decision as a quasi-judge, you need to be really unbiased and focused on what's here. And that's fair to the applicant. They need to have their due process. They need to be able to answer your questions, and you need to be able to ask them. When people in the public speak, they need to be able to address that as well. So if we're talking with people in the public or things without the applicant knowing, the applicant doesn't have due process to respond in any way and doesn't even know necessarily what other information you've received. So in these matters, that's why we are really focused on following these quasi-judicial rules. You look like you have a question, David, do you?
Yeah, as far as the due process of still going and maybe learning about the development, But what I heard you say is just make sure all of the decisions or the information that you got inside the quasi-judicial hearing was how you made your decision. What are your thoughts on that as far as just, going to and learning more about the development, but not?
Let me get to okay, so that's the key question and a good question. Let's go to the next slide, which I think is ex parte communications. So I'll read through it and then I'll explain it. In quasi-judicial hearings, the parties are entitled to due process, which includes the right to present evidence and cross-examine witnesses at the hearing. In such matters, council members should be careful to avoid ex parte communications, which are communications occurring outside of the quasi-judicial hearing. Ex parte communications include talking to individuals about a quasi-judicial matter which may later come before the council. Less obviously, such ex parte communications may also include when a council member conducts their own investigation into the matter, including site visits to the subject property in a land use matter. If ex parte communications have occurred, then they must be disclosed at the quasi-judicial hearing before a final decision is made in order to give the other side the ability to rebut such information, or they are presumed prejudicial to the outcome and may result in a finding of a violation of procedural due process. The City of Fort Walton Beach has in its land development code that willful ex parte communications about a pending application are prohibited, and all ex parte communications must be disclosed pursuant to section 90600 of your LDC. So I want to explain that this only applies in quasi-judicial matters. So you can go, and you should go, and be interested in all the things going on in the city and city-initiated projects and all of these things you can certainly talk about and learn about. But we're talking specifically about developer applications, okay? And anytime a developer is coming in here with an application, you should not be investigating outside of this room. And if you do, you should, disclose it here. When we start the conversation, you would need to say, I talked to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, here's the nature of our communications, this is what we said, and it won't influence my vote, but the applicant can then respond to it in some way and get their due process that way. So to answer your question, yeah, you shouldn't be doing it if it's quasi-judicial. But again, most of what you're doing up here is not quasi-judicial. Most of what you do, you're free to examine on the outside. Just keep it in mind when it's a developer request. Any questions on that? Well, I think that was the last of the slides. So if anyone has questions or wants to give further comments, now's the time, or we can, City Manager, I know you have something.
Well, what Ms. Cobb is talking about is that really our role, her role, Ms. Barnes' role, and my role for right now until my successor arrives here, is keeping you out of trouble and keeping the public informed. But we've talked tonight about the state law, which is the Sunshine Law, and some of those things. We've talked about city procedure on meetings and things like that. We've talked about the judicial rules, that how this body acts as a quasi-judicial and what your behavior should be there. But here in the city, we've got another layer. We've got a charter that we adhere to, which is also part of our legal book. And there's only really one area where I find that council sometimes kind of gets a little bit out of bounds there. And that's really when you start dealing with staff, because we do have a great group of people here that are here really to serve you guys, which in turn serves the citizenry. And it's Section 14 of our charter. I had to read it again today. When I was on council, and I was fortunate to have sat in your chairs, there was almost like a zero tolerance. If you needed information, you went and said, hey, I want to go talk to utilities about an issue I want to bring up. I am pretty okay with that as long as you guys are gathering information. The only time, again, you'd get you into trouble is when you start directing staff. So if you guys ever want to have a meeting, with myself, and I'm sure my successor, depending on how he wants to handle things, I'll be there with you to help you. So if you say, hey, while you're there, if you're there with me, if you want to give them some kind of direction, you're more than willing to do that. But you just don't want to be out there on your own, meeting with them and doing things by yourselves, directing staff. That's where you really get into trouble, because then you've got a staff member that's going to come back on you, and Ms. Kopp will tell you the exact, then it comes back on all of us. So our job is to keep you guys in the best light. And in doing so, that's the only real way that you can ever get into trouble here. But it comes with some of those same penalties. They can throw you off the board, they can fine you. It just really makes for, the employees get upset and come back on us. So that's the one thing I think that stands out to me. I got to tell you, I hate to admit this, but some of the things she was talking about, I was not educated enough sometimes when I sat on council. It took me a while to understand the quasi-judicial, for instance. I would, she talked primarily about developers. I would go out sometimes and meet with a homeowner, because sometimes there'll be a quasi-judicial with a homeowner. I did not realize until I'd been on for some time, wait, I'm not supposed to be talking to them either. The evidence is supposed to be presented here just like in a trial, and you guys are making the decision. It'll take a while for you to really be seasoned city council members and how you serve the community. Not that you're doing anything wrong and doing your best job that you can. But again, us three in particular are here for you. In turn, we're here for the citizens. And never forget, my phone can ring at 2 o'clock in the morning if you've got a problem with a citizen, you need some help. Maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't, but I probably will. But it's important that we continue to do our job. I'm glad to see you guys all sitting here. I think it's going to be an awesome group. And I'm always available. I reach out to you, try not to bother you. Hey, if you need anything, I'm here. That's really my role. And I've always understood that, because I was so fortunate to have great city managers that were here to help me. And if I can do anything, at least for the short term, while I'm here for the next month or 6 weeks, whatever it takes, I'm here. So just know you can lean on me any way you can. Troubles, I'll get you in touch with Kim. If you can't reach her, if I can help in any way, don't hesitate. That's all I've got. Thank you, Ms. Cobb.
And same here, I want to say, if you guys need me for anything, call anytime.
Yeah, I would say that these are the 3 charter officers, which under the charter, all 3 of us work directly for the city council. You guys can hire us, you guys can fire us, you guys can do what you want.
And I will add one more thing. We work we really work more as a team. Not that we do not embrace and work with staff every step of the way, but I think something that's kind of behind us a little bit, and Ms. Barnes will tell you, we've worked together a lot since I've been here to help support me, because I'm kind of trying to support you in an interim. I don't maybe have the experience sometimes that the guys that have been before me have. But I know that we work independently a little bit sometimes, because we know sometimes intimately what your wishes are, and to make that mission forward. One thing Kim touched on that I thought was important was about, I wrote down, vagueness is not against the law. So if you say, you need to make a quick response to one of us that doesn't have a ton of elaborate details in a text, it's not out of bounds. We do that occasionally, and that's just part of it. But I think what she was talking about was when you get deep down onto some deep stuff on text, probably not the best thing. Probably not emails. Probably like the mayor said, you want to make those calls and do that in person when you can. That's it.
Thanks. All right. Any other questions? Well, we look forward to working with all of you, and thank you so much for your time and for listening to that 50 minutes of educational materials.
I thought it was great. Thank you, Ms. Kopp, for putting that on and putting it together, and we are adjourned.